Good morning. Welcome to TOK Class number 5. What do you know? This morning we're going to engage in a course overview. This is the where is this all going? Consider this a sort of video syllabus, if you will. Winston Churchill famously said, "Now is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning." This class brings us to the end of our second week. I know the first week was very haphazard, and we know that that's not going to be the way things are going forward. Um, I apologize for my surroundings. These are the luxurious Cafiero Studios located in beautiful downtown Lake Highlands. Um, Today I want to take you through very briefly our overview for the course. You can consider this our video syllabus, if you will, for this semester. Um, the class is roughly divided into 3-week modules. Each module represents a portion of the course of study, and there are 2 for each 6 weeks in the school calendar. Now, not every 6 weeks has exactly 6 calendar weeks. There's also spring break and star testing and all kinds of other disruptions thrown in, as well as exams. But this will give us a pretty solid overview. And my goal today is to walk you through the basic modules that will make up the course for this semester. The first 6 weeks, where we are now, is the beginning of our TOK journey. This is introduction to what is TOK, how do you do TOK, how do you acquire the lens through which we view the theory of knowledge. The first module, Module 1, is Course Introduction, Knowers and Knowing. We've had a pretty good introduction to the idea of TOK and the role of the knower. Our discussion yesterday about the limits of knowledge, what can be known, Descartes' assertion, the cogito. This began our focus on knowers. We will complete this focus next week. Remember, short week next week because of the MLK holiday. Not a problem. We're used to short weeks at this point already. But we will take a look at the TOK diagram that we touched on briefly yesterday, and we'll look at getting that into our workbook. So you will need your green eggs and ham when we have class on Tuesday. You should also have your Plato and a platypus. You won't need that until Wednesday's class, but you do need that next week as well. If you are still trying to get Plato and a platypus, as long as you have green eggs and ham and you have someone with a copy of Plato and a platypus that you can look on with for next week, you'll be okay. But you are going to need your own copy of that text ASAP. We also, in this module, did our first writing, the This I Believe Essay 1. It's called Essay 1 because at the end of this semester, you're going to revisit the This I Believe based on what you've learned, how your writing and thinking have hopefully matured or grown in some way. You will do a second This I Believe essay. This I Believe Essay 2 that comes at the end of the course counts as part of your semester exam, the final exam for this semester. I'll go into more detail about assessments as we get farther along. So, knowers and knowing, TOK diagram, knowledge and writing. That's this module. The week after next, we will start Module 2. Module 2 is about knowledge questions, in which we start with real life situations. From these, we develop knowledge claims, and from those, we dive deeper into universal knowledge questions. These terms will all be defined for you when appropriate, so don't panic. A good motto for this course overall is don't panic. I thought about having that printed in large, friendly red letters right on the syllabus, but that would have upped our cost, and we don't want that. These themes are going to be important for the first of the two IB assessments for this course. That is the TOK oral presentation. Everything we do this semester is really working us towards the oral presentation, developing our presentation skills, our critical thinking skills, our awareness of TOK and TOK frameworks for thinking, and our ability to generate knowledge questions. All of those will derive from the work we do during the next semester. The focus will be exploring TOK in Module 2, and we're going to do something called peer teach. I'm not going to teach you guys Plato and a Platypus. You're going to develop your oral presentation skills by being broken into small groups, 2 or 3 students tops, small groups, and presenting chapters, one per week, approximately one per week. I'll have guidelines and more details. If you love doing oral presentations and this is your thing, I'm sorry, you're only going to have one per week. And not everybody obviously will present each time. If you hate oral presentations and standing up in front of a group and having to speak to people, great news. We're only going to do one per week, and not everybody will present each week. We will be looking in the Module 2 at the first 3 chapters of Plato and a Platypus through the peer teach, and we will be working on something called the Vitruvia. You want to ask the seniors what they thought of the Vitruvia workshop. They got it as a concentrated one day. We'll probably break it up into 2 or maybe even 3 class periods, depending on just how much depth and what our logistical situation is at that time. During the second 6 weeks, our focus will be on the ways of knowing and areas of knowledge, Part 1. It's called Part 1 because, as you might imagine, there is a Part 2. We introduce all of the ways of knowing and areas of knowledge that are part of the TOK diagram during this 6 weeks. During the following, final 6 weeks of this semester, we will zoom in and focus more intensely. I'll talk about that when the time comes in just a few minutes. For Module 3, that's the second 6 weeks of this semester, or the, what is that, fifth 6 weeks of the school year. For that module, we're going to be looking at our ways of knowing. We're going to be going into more depth on the ways of knowing. We'll also be looking at communication, precision, and some games theory. For the games theory and communication and precision lessons, you're going to be involved in a series of online, war games, basically, online simulations of diplomacy in early 20th century Europe. You'll take the role of one of the great powers, like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or the Tsarist Russians, or the monarchy of Great Britain, and you will represent your country's interests in peace and war through the game engine of diplomacy. A lot more about that when we get to it, but you're basically going to be playing a game for credit. Always nice. We also will be looking at completing the midpoint of our peer teach, chapters 4 through 6 during that unit, and that will bring us to the end of Module 3. Module 4, okay, this is one of my favorite parts of the year. Module 4, we're going to be going into more detail in the areas of knowledge. We'll explore each of the areas of knowledge in a introductory fashion. Later in the final 6 weeks, we'll actually take a deep dive on a couple of the ways of knowing and a few of the areas of knowledge. But we'll complete our introduction to areas of knowledge. We'll finish our or almost finish our Plato and a Platypus peer teaching. But the best part are integrated studies. Media studies is a section where we use a film as well as a short story and some historical research to pull all of these different TOK viewpoints together and apply them to a related theme across several types of media. And the media for this one is the Ridley Scott film Blade Runner. If you haven't seen Blade Runner, you're in for a treat. And if you have seen it, you know why I want you to see it again. It is the best TOK movie. It's as good a movie for TOK as Green Eggs and Ham is a book for TOK. And that's saying something. Very excited for this. Cannot wait to share this with you guys. As promised, the third 6 weeks, Ways of Knowing and Areas of Knowledge Part 2. This is our deep dive into some specific ways of knowing and specific areas of knowledge. One thing which the videos here do not address, I'm hoping that we will be sufficiently on schedule to work a second media studies into the final 6 weeks. I like to do 2 per year, 2 per semester, but it's just tough because of our late start and the odd logistics of the course this year, the 0-hour schedule, and of course the fact that, at least for the beginning of the course, I'm not working with you face-to-face. I can't really predict if we'll be able to fit it in. But if we are able to fit it in, we will do a second media study around the theme of globalization and the impact of globalization on knowing. And the film for that media study will be Slumdog Millionaire. Last 6 weeks, Module 5. Module 5 will be a deeper exploration of the ways of knowing. The ways of knowing we'll concentrate on are not set in stone, but currently I'm thinking that we'll look at reason, sense perception, and language. And we'll look at everything from the limitations of pure reason, as we discussed so briefly with the cogito. We'll look at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis for language. Basically, does language represent reality, or does reality fit the labels that we construct in our minds for language? And sense perception, we'll be looking at illusions. We'll be looking at the limitations of senses. We'll be doing some fairly interesting explorations into the unexplored limits of our existing senses, and discussion of how many senses we have. The answer is a lot more than you've been led to believe. We will also introduce the TOK essay. The TOK essay, along with the oral presentation, forms the second part of the IB assessment. The TOK essay we're not going to work on this year. The TOK essay is basically your final exam for this course as a senior. We're instead going to be concentrating on just the introduction, so that you have the summer to think about it, to come up with ideas, to come up with questions, to kind of mentally prepare yourself so that we can figure out what skills and knowledge you're going to need to complete that task during the fall semester next year. Just as Module 5 was a deeper exploration of some of the ways of knowing, Module 6 is a deeper exploration of some of the areas of knowledge. We will focus on social sciences, the arts, and history. We will also have our introduction more formally to the TOK presentation. The idea is that we'll spend the end of the year working on your TOK presentations. You will have the summer in which to perfect them or to set them aside and unleash your brain on other problems. When you come back as seniors in the first unit, the first module of your senior year, you will be presenting your TOK orals. So the idea is the more work we get done on them now, the more time you have to develop them, practice them, ask questions, or just become emotionally and intellectually more comfortable with the fact that you're going to be individually presenting those to begin your senior year. That takes us to the end of the course for this year. So let's just recap very briefly. The primary source of grades for your DISD report card, your grade for this class, is your weekly participation and preparation. That is a score that you will be receiving approximately once a week. There's also the individual written assignments. There is the peer teaching assignments, and there is the media study assignment. There are the media study assignments. Finally, This I Believe Essay 1 and Essay 2, as well as a final exam. It's important that you keep up with your workbook, the Green Eggs and Ham workbook, as that is your notes. The semester exam in May is an open note exam, as long as you have your physical copy of Green Eggs and Ham. For the IB, there are two assignments, the essay and the oral presentation. The oral presentation is about half the weight of the essay. We will start work at the end of this year on your oral presentations. I will have an optional workshop available over the summer for those of you who want to come in and practice and get feedback before the school year starts as seniors. And you will have an opportunity to practice your orals at that time. During the first unit of your senior year, you will deliver your TOK oral presentation. You will receive a moderated score based on the rubric at that time. At the end of your senior semester, the end of the fall semester, you will submit your TOK essay to the IB. You will also submit a draft to me that will be scored locally, and that will count as 50% of your final exam. The other 50%, again, will be an open note review, primarily focused on terminology, vocabulary. TOK is something you do much more than it is something you test. So these are performance metrics rather than a test of knowledge content. That brings us to the end of this morning's lesson. I know that we ran a little short today, and if I listen very carefully, I can actually hear your hearts breaking. I would like you to use this time again to discuss. And I obviously, I'm not there moderating your discussion, but I'm hoping that you really are taking some time to share with one another what you think, what questions you have, what you're afraid of, And do feel free to send me feedback. Hey, some of us were talking and we had this question about the oral presentation. Um, I wasn't really paying attention when we were talking about the cogito, and now I feel like I am missing something important. Can I go over that again? I really would like to get feedback from you if you have questions or concerns. Otherwise, I look forward to working with you directly as soon as possible. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next week.